Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Hello and welcome to the Business Innovators Radio Podcast. I'm your host, Rick Brown. My guest today is Nick Powills, founder and CEO of No Limit Agency. It's a full-service communications agency based out of Chicago, Illinois, and they help brands by bridging public relations, social media, marketing, advertising, digital, and a whole lot of creativity. He's also author of the book Sticks and Stones, in which he shares how his personal struggle with weight and being teased as a kid fueled his drive toward being a successful entrepreneur. Nick's book and his seminars help audiences learn how to turn their own struggles into strengths, helping them achieve more on their own terms. Nick, welcome to the Business Innovators Radio Podcast.
Thank you.
You bet. Tell us a little bit about the book, maybe some backstory that led you to write that book and what it's about.
Yeah, so it comes from a few different places. I, much like everybody else, has gone through some tough spots in life. And it's not that mine are any worse or any better, any easier, any different than anybody else. It's just that I was able at some point to identify it as my own. And when I was going through those moments, the first time I was called fat was when I was 5 in the kindergarten. And I can still go back to how I felt in that moment to say, you know, everything felt great up until then. My concept of the world was everything was rosy. I loved baseball, and that was it. And then, you know, it comes shattering down in a moment where you hear a word that you weren't used to before because life was sound before then. And in that moment, it sucked. But in reality, it ends up being tremendous fuel because that chip on the shoulder keeps growing. And I relate in the book to sports, and I'm a huge sports fan. But you take a Tom Brady where every team overlooks him 6 times. And then finally one gives him a shot and he's like, you know what, screw all you. I'm coming at you. And now he's the greatest of all time. Jordan being cut from his high school team. Almost every success story. And it's not just the big successes. It could be running a marathon. There's something inside us that motivates us to make things happen because this life is chaotic and hard. And when we can start looking at those things as fuel, it changes us. So I wanted to put it in a book format. Even writing a book was a pain. I wrote the whole manuscript and had agents and publishers all reject me until Inc. magazine said yes. So I got the one shot. That motivated me to keep pushing it. And now it collects dust on plenty of bookshelves across the
Was interesting that you talk about how many publishers you went through. I mean, was this kind of reliving 5 years old all over again?
Yeah, yes. And then even, I mean, in the book I write about, I was told I wasn't a good enough writer. And then I go on to be a journalist. It was a constant until I started. It was no longer excuses. It was only energy for whatever I was going to accomplish. But it was hard. It was like rejection. I'm like, well crap. I've created a business that is a multi-million-dollar business. I employ plenty of people. Haven't I done enough to do this? And it's like, no, you haven't. You haven't mastered the art of writing. So I wrote the whole manuscript, submitted it, got the one bite, and then new editor comes in place. She's like, look, I like the idea. We are rewriting the entire thing. So I started from scratch, and that was tough. It was something that I don't know that I'll ever do again, but it felt good when it was accomplished, and I understood how my equation worked into making something that was going to be challenging, turn into something that I could be proud of.
Good. Who's the audience for your book?
Yeah, I mean, the primary is still entrepreneurs. That's who I speak to on a regular basis. Someone that is either debating whether about getting into business or thinking about what's next in their life. That's the primary. But the reality is the equation is very simple, and then there's complexities to the way that I created it. But what is your foundation? This is your life story. Your momentum is when you start to get the little wins. And then when you hit velocity, you break through these brick walls that come at you, and you're like, come at me. It doesn't affect me. I'm going to go right through you, and I'm going to accomplish my goal. So, you know, someone that's running a race, someone that wants a raise or a promotion at their job can relate to this too. But the primary audience is still going to be entrepreneurs that are trying to figure out how does their life story end up helping them when they're trying to crush it at business.
I'm wondering that if kind of the first step that, most of us see is that just taking that first step, taking action and letting that momentum build, right?
Yeah, but it's also looking back at whatever it was. Your parents were not great parents. Your teachers were not great teachers. You were bullied. You were cut from your baseball team. You were fired from a job. There's like this trigger moment that happens that it's like it forces us to then go execute on an idea that we had. But it seems like there's still a trigger that pushes us to that next level to then make us say yes and look at it differently. That it sucked, but we're in control of how that narrative is told. We get to decide if our crappy childhoods play into the behavior that we do today. That's your decision as a human being.
You mentioned you have your own company, No Limit Agency. Tell us a little bit about this and the types of clients that you help out.
We started off 2008. I pitched 2 business concepts to my former employer. First one was called Chise, the end of franchise as a term. He said it's not going to work. Today, we run 1851 Franchise, which is our content marketing platform, but also a trade magazine on the front end. And then No Limit Agency, I pitched, it was a manifesto on how social media would transform the agency world. And he said, social media is a fad. It's not going to work. And I quit my job and I started a social media agency. And so the tweak was, I was a trained journalist into being a publicist. So I went to the dark side, found success there. And now I started noticing that all these brands build great stories and then they don't do anything with it. So in the very early stages, what we were going to use social for is, one, can we build relationships with reporters that are not hidden behind a phone or email? And then 2, could we take the content that we've secured and become a little bit more proactive with it? PR firms, even today, they'll go get all this press for a client. They're like, all right, put it on your website. It's like, okay, but shouldn't I be doing more with it? And in today's world, you can build an audience around the fact that you were featured in the LA Times. That was just moment 1. Now you do something with it. So our business was built on how do we put more fuel or energy behind the work that we've already done, so it's not just a singular moment. There's things that have happened to you or I 5 years ago that we should be reactivating, especially if it was something that had an impact in either of our businesses or our careers, reactivating and saying, hey, here's an update on what's going on. And it evolved, but I realized as a journalist, the stories that I loved were the people stories. It wasn't that, hey, business X opened in town Y. It was that someone risked it all. They were a former CEO that was laid off, and now they're going to open up this business. And they're passionate about serving pizza to the community, but they became that because their mom used to make pizzas and whatever it is. You look at Apple and Sony as two brands. Apple, great brand. We would all use the term great. It's one of the few greats. You look at it, and we talk about Steve Jobs. Everybody knows who Steve Jobs is still. He died in 2011. So we're talking 8 years have passed since he died. They found a way to put people first. Sony had this guy, Nobutashi, who created the Walkman, the digital camera, and the camcorder. 3 of the most important inventions that Steve Jobs then took and made even better. And Sony never puts this guy front and center. He also died in 2011. Nobody knows that name, Nobutashi. So it's interesting. Like the difference between good and great is so thin, and I believe that it's built within people. So the foundation of our agency is also that brands don't sell brands, people do, which relates back to my whole life story of figuring this thing out. But yeah, I mean, we have 40 people. We've had some great success. We have big ambitions.
Tell us what the ideal client for No Limit Agency looks like.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So we had this tax preparation client out of Brooklyn, New York, and we go to their launch meeting, and we would do this with all of our clients and say, all right, what is winning? Like, I want national. Okay, you want national media, just like everybody else. So we were like, what national? He's like, I want the Wall Street Journal. I'm like, all right, you're a 3-unit tax preparation franchise out of Brooklyn, New York, and you want national. Now, the end that comes out of this is that the brand was irrelevant. We start talking to him about his story, and we land on this thing that he would ride his bike around Brooklyn to find the next location. So he'd get on that bicycle and just go and become one in the community. I was like, well, that's interesting real estate selection. We pitched at the Wall Street Journal, front page of Personal Finance. We get him that story. So the truth is the ideal brand is just someone that's willing to be vulnerable with their story and understands that PR is what you pray for. Advertising is what you pay for. So we cannot make you magically appear in the Sunday newspaper. We can try to identify the stories that will have effect. So it's any brand that has a good story. Now, in our current model, franchising is front and center. We rep about 80 different franchise brands. So that's our priority right now. But through the content marketing platform, we're diversifying that portfolio a little bit more. So to make it a little bit more holistic.
So you used an interesting word there that I think is really important here, and that's vulnerability. Talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough thing for people to really be honest with themselves, with their brands. There are CEOs that operate their business and say, we want X number of sales next year, but last year you didn't do that. And you're not giving double the resources. So how did you land in there? And that's a CEO that probably operates scared. They're reporting to a board. They have the pressures of growth because if we're not growing, we're dying. But if you dive into the vulnerability and say, hey, let's actually work through the data. Let's actually work through the things that you're scared about as a business to see if we can offset that with some storytelling or some content or some marketing to give you the scaffolding that helps your business. But far too often, the CEOs of this world have been raised in a place, and they've probably been beat down along the way too, that some board has put too much pressure on them that is unrealistic, that forces them to switch jobs every 3 to 4 years. It's rare that you get them there. The entrepreneur is much more willing to be vulnerable because they are deeply passionate about what they're trying to create. Nobody can compete with the entrepreneur on a passion level. So historically, the companies that become most vulnerable are going to be the entrepreneurial ones. So those are more like an emerging franchise brand that has 20 to 50 locations. But occasionally we have a client, longtime client, Checkers and Rallies. They had some grease on their brand. We were tasked with helping them turn around. It was work, but we got their CEO to be vulnerable and got him to agree to go on Undercover Boss. And when he goes on Undercover Boss, he was absolutely vulnerable on there. But I think that turns into some of the charm and some of their success story, because then when franchise buyers are looking at their brand, they're like, I'm buying from that guy. I trust that guy. It's so powerful when we actually let our guard down a little bit and let our story do the talking.
Yeah, it shows the human side to it. You think is there ever a point where there's too much vulnerability, where it tips the other way?
Yeah, certainly now. I mean, you think about us as humans and our take on the current president that we have. It's a very interesting climate. It used to be that someone votes for a Democrat, other person votes for a Republican. They both put their little signs up in their yard. Election's done, signs come down. If someone's grandmother died, the other one brings over pasta. Now they look at it, you had a Trump sign in your yard, screw you. I don't care that your grandma died. I hate you for hating Trump. That means the vulnerability is almost getting shunned a little bit more than it has in the past. And I don't think that's the right way for us to act or behave as humans, but it is what it is. Vulnerability in social media, vulnerability in, you can hear any actor talk about reviewing the movie, or if they read the reviews after and they talk about all the bad stuff. Yeah, it's definitely there. But if we can just get to a place of comfort and even just vulnerability in our own story and try not to be an asshole in the way that we're communicating with people, then there's probably a middle ground here where there's still some sweetness in what we can accomplish.
You talked about social media. You talked about some different ways of helping to tell that human side of the story. What do you see kind of where PR is going, how companies, young companies, entrepreneurs, CEOs, what should they be focusing on when it comes to trying to tell their story? Where is this industry kind of going that helps them do that?
Well, I mean, it's clearly shifting. So there's a few things. One, let's understand where journalism really comes from, and it's because someone's like, hey, we figure out a way to sell businesses on how to advertise in our newspaper. Therefore, how do we get people to read it? Well, we got to give them news. They're not going to pick up our publication just to look and sift through all the ads that we have in here. So journalism was still created as a way to offset the business side. These are not nonprofit journalism organizations. But what's happening now is there's this like shift that's going on where advertorial and editorial need to connect a little bit more, because journalist X, you're not going to have your job unless we can drive sales to keep the lights on at our publication. So that's a little bit of a battle. This new term, influencer marketing, that everybody is buzzing around. Guys, that's journalists. That's what they were. Third-party credibility. So it's been around forever. It just shifted when you or I get to be the journalist because we can post on LinkedIn or Facebook what our opinion is, and instantly we have credibility. So there are a lot of shifts that are going on. My belief is that those that sell ads and those that write the content are going to have to get together and put their swords down and say, how do we work together here? Because as long as it's a legitimate story that we're telling, and if the brand wants to put some fuel behind it, okay, they should. We're not dumb. Then those are going to be the publications that survive. Because there's not Facebook's the number one news source right now, or Twitter. I mean, we can find out everything that's happening on there. But if we think about the influencer side, still there's value about having a Wall Street Journal say, yeah, your product is legit. There's value in that. So as long as there's value in that, keep leveraging that, but be conscious that the whole world is shifting. At the end of the day, everything is PR. Advertising is PR, marketing is PR. It's all public relations. It's all taking a message that is controlled and delivering it out to an audience.
What about social media? Where is it a fad?
Yeah, it's a great, I love that question. Yes, but it's not a fad because social media is a fad. It's because agencies and brands don't know how to use it. If you go on social, there's two things that I think are important to look at. One is buy my burger, buy my burger, buy my burger, buy my burger. And not once are they saying, hey, fans, how can we change our burger to be better? Which they'd be glad to tell you. Hey, fans, next time we do an LTO, what should our burger be? They're not doing that. Hey, fans, what do you love most about our burger so we can do more of that? There's no conversation. So brands and agencies, we're going to go on social media. No. You're going to go in media, and you just happen to distribute it on a social network. So you take a Wendy's. What is Wendy's doing right? They threw away the stupid content calendar and just said, let's be social. We're going to react in the moment. We're going to respond to brands. We're going to battle on there. No content calendar, where everyone else is like, CEO gets in the room. He's like, let's talk about our social calendar. And it's like, intern, what do you think we should write about? And the intern has no idea what the brand is. So they're like, we should post buy my burger. So brands and agencies have screwed it up because they focus on the term media when social and conversation is key. Another thing, if you look on these brand pages, nobody responds. So they're like, what do you like most about our brand? And they're like, I love that you freshly bake your buns. And I was like, you want to say thanks for this? Like, there's no social. So it's like, is it a fad? Yeah, for the time being, yeah, until we start challenging the way that we communicate, because it's just garbage media. And that's probably why Facebook's like, we got an idea, let's make zero reach. So you have to spend advertising dollars to now talk to your audience, because you'll do it. And brands, if they look at it and like, what am I getting out of social? I'll evaluate Facebook pages. They're like, what do you think of our Facebook page? I go, well, you got 3 total likes over the last month. Why are you doing this? Well, we need to be on Facebook. So it's just because nobody knows how to use it. Except for influencers who are like, yeah, I'm going to communicate with my audience. Yeah, I'm going to talk to them. Yeah, I'm going to communicate with them when they post.
So help us here. Give us a clue. What's the best way, or what's an easiest way to get out there and to communicate and to start building what you're talking about?
Rick, it's you. I mean, you're doing it right now. You have a podcast that is you. You've humanized yourself. You're having a voice. You're talking with people that you find interesting, or you're finding a topic that you find interesting. You're then probably going to post that on your LinkedIn page. Yeah, might it go up on your agency page? Sure. But if you look at the interactions on your LinkedIn page versus your agency page is going to have nothing. Yours is going to have a lot. So it's already written for us. And if we open up our eyes and be like, your business is you, my business is me, and then it goes downward, we win. I'm not whether I like the necessarily all of the content that Barstool Sports does or not is irrelevant. But you look at their format; they got their staff posting podcasts. They have their staff managing Barstool, insert name, Instagram pages. They've humanized their brand. There's the blueprint, guys. Like, let your people have voices. Encourage them to talk about the things that they love most. about your company. You're doing it. You're automatically doing it right now. You're creating content that resonates. So you dial that all the way to a small business owner. Just post on your Facebook page, like yours, not your brand page. Connect with people in your community. Become friends with them. This is what this is set up to do. It's already designed. Unfortunately, we just don't do it.
Yeah, I agree with that. This might be a redundant question, but what do you think maybe one of the biggest myths is? Let's say about working with a PR agency and trying to get your brand recognized.
Yeah, that it's going to move the needle, right? I mean, you're like, I hired a PR firm. I'm gonna sell a ton of X, whatever your widget is. Yeah, but you got to go back to what we were talking about in the beginning. If you get on CBS LA's morning show, and it was a great segment, but you and I are the buyers, and you and I are busy doing this. If it's on right this second, and we're your number one buyers for this, we didn't see it. Mm-hmm. So the myth is, yeah, they're going to do that, and then they're going to say, well, I got no value out of this. Nah, not no value, because let's also talk about the candidate journey. The candidate journey, it's going to take a while for it to get in front of the two of us because we're busy doing this. But eventually, maybe that message gets in front of us, and then we buy. So don't discount the value of what you're spending from marketing or PR standpoint on just the one hit. And then two, do something with it. Market it. Deliver that out there. Put advertising against it. Make sure that if you know that we're the right buyers, and unfortunately we didn't see it, make us see it. Like, that's what the beauty of social is today. So it's not that it's missed, but it's just because we grow up in a world where we want the answer to a question, we Google it, versus, at least when I was a kid, I had to go to the library. It's a different time. So we want instant gratification off of everything we do. And the reality is marketing takes time. And if you really study the candidate's journey, they need a lot more touch points than you can even imagine. And they're more sophisticated, and they're doing their homework, and they're looking at reviews, and they're talking to their friends. And when they get to clicking on your site, it's going to say referral source Google. And that's not what the equation was. The equation was much more complex than that.
That's some good advice. I'm wondering what... let's say you could have a 60-second phone call with your former self, your younger self, who first thought about going into business for yourself. What would that conversation sound like, do you think?
It's going to be hard. You're going to have a lot of tough moments. I think the people side of everything is the toughest thing to deal with. When I started our company, I was like, we're going to be like Google, and we're gonna be Google-esque, and our culture is going to be amazing. And I've learned over time that I'm not in control of the culture. I'm in control of the hiring. I'm in control of saying no. I'm not in control of the culture. And that the more that I can establish the vision with my leadership, and then they can establish it with the next group and the next group and the next group, that's the best shot we have at building a good business. So I would tell my former self, it's going to be hard. Don't give up though. Find joy in the little moments. I've said this to myself even today. I look in my office, we're sitting in the Prudential building in downtown Chicago, and I'm like, man, we're not hitting our potential. There's so much more we could be doing. I'm like, well, shit, I got to pause for 1 second and say, you've done something good. Like, this has been good, because this one life that we live is going to go way too fast. The saying is true. If you don't stop and sniff the roses or smell the roses, you're going to miss some good things. And that's something that I would tell myself too. Like, try to be more appreciative of what is being accomplished than what you want to accomplish.
Yeah, you got to take those small victories whenever you can get them, I think. Hey, let's switch gears just a little bit. We've already started trending this way. You familiar with the Proust questionnaire? Yeah, Marcel Proust was a French writer back in the early 1900s, and he believed that by answering some specific questions, you reveal a lot about yourself. Pretty harmless questions, and there's no right or wrong answers here, but I'd like to run a couple by you, and let's show some vulnerability and show that human side of it. That's why I like going through this. So you ready for that?
Love it. Let's go.
All right. What is your idea of perfect happiness?
Oh, I love that question. So I was talking with a client recently, and he said, I'm not happy. And I said, you know what? I understand where you're coming from. I struggle with that too. And we start talking, and we realize that it's not happiness that we're talking about. We're talking about fulfillment. Because happiness, I believe, is in our control. We decide if we're happy or not. And there are circumstances that might sway us in one direction. Happiness is up to us. Fulfillment is what we're really trying to find. And when you don't feel fulfilled, that probably creates this moment where you question your happiness. But perfect happiness for me probably doesn't exist. That's probably the truth. I think I'm going to be chasing this my entire life. I will say when I get home from work and I have 2 little boys and they're like, Dada, like even just thinking about that moment makes me feel great inside, because like 2 little guys, unconditional love at the moment. And when they're teenagers, they'll probably hate me, but that feels good. So the truth is, if I'm being really honest, I don't know that I'll ever find true happiness because I have such high ambition.
I appreciate that answer. Very good. Little lighter question here. Which talent would you most like to have?
I mean, I would love the ability to fly or some superhero thing. Those don't seem to be a talent that I can. I'd love to be able to snap my fingers. Can't do that. Or roll my tongue. Cannot do that.
You can't snap your fingers.
There's nothing.
Do you have fingerprints?
I do. I don't know why. I mean, maybe like soft baby hands. Yeah, I think here's the truth. I wish I had more empathy. That's the skill set that I want. I am not very empathetic, and I'm sure that would do me a lot better. I have a business coach that works with me on it. It would swing my 360 review in a much more positive way. But there's vulnerable answer is empathy. That is my answer.
You mentioned the ability to fly or be a superhero. Do you have a favorite superhero?
Boy, I wish I was more into superheroes. It's like my superheroes are all entrepreneurs. But yeah, I mean, I would love the idea to fly. So I guess Superman just by default.
Do you have a favorite author?
Yeah, but it will swing in the moment. Like I just reread Good to Great by Jim Collins, and it's more so just to get my mind thinking. But yeah, I mean, it will swing. I love Gino Wickman with Traction. That's something that we've put in place in our company. A lot of our clients are doing the same. Patrick Linciconi with 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. We went through that exercise as a group. So I wouldn't say favorite. It as long as I can find someone that gets my brain thinking, I feel good about them as an author.
Okay, finally, what is your motto?
Yeah, that life is short. That's it. I look around and I know it. I know it in my heart. I can see people around me getting older. I can see their regrets. They're not regretting working more. It's being a part of their family. So yeah, life is short, and I need to constantly think of that so that I can try to find happiness in the small moments, not just in the big picture.
Nick, some very thoughtful answers, man. I appreciate that. Hey, listen, how can some folks find out more about what you do, what No Limits Agency does, and can help them?
Yeah, I mean, I would say if you Google my name, Nick Powills, I'm the only one in the world, so it's not hard to find. Google will probably correct it. You'll find a lot of my stuff. I do a lot of writing on 1851franchise.com. That's specific to business or things that are going on in our agency. What's funny is I write those basically 2 months in advance, and it seems whatever's publishing on that Thursday, it completely had purpose for publishing on that Thursday. It's a running joke with my team. They're like, "Oh my God, you wrote about don't quit your job without another job," and then someone quits the job without another job that day. So, yeah, I mean, you Google me and you'll find everything you need to find.
That's great. Nick Powills, CEO of No Limit Agency, author of Sticks and Stones. Nick, thanks so much for joining us on the show today.
Love the conversation. Thank you for it.
And that's a wrap for this episode of the Business Innovators Radio Podcast. I'm your host, Rick Brown. Until next time, keep innovating.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.